The sweltering heat of Qatar's desert clung to me like an invisible mantle, the dry warmth seeping into my skin until it felt like a part of my very being. I stood on the weathered wooden pier, its sun-bleached planks creaking faintly beneath my weight as I idly nudged my sandals against the edges. Beyond the pier, a parade of gleaming, high-end cars rolled by with a deliberate slowness, their drivers making no attempt to hide their interest. The procession seemed like a fashion show on wheels, young men with meticulously styled hair and sunglasses that likely cost more than most people's monthly rent exchanged knowing glances and appraising looks as they passed. "Nice view, huh?" The voice startled me, a rich baritone that seemed to cut through the air with an ease that was both unsettling and intriguing. I turned, my gaze landing on a tall man leaning against the railing a few feet away. His sun-streaked hair framed a face marked with confidence, and his easy smile hinted at a charm that he likely wielded as effortlessly as his crisp, unbuttoned linen shirt. There was something about the casual arrogance in his posture, the way he seemed to own the space around him, that I normally found annoying. But tonight, for some reason, it didn't bother me as much. "Yeah," I replied, deliberately casual, as I turned my attention back to the horizon. The sun was dipping low, its fiery orange glow splashed across the sky like paint on a vast canvas. "But sunsets are pretty routine around here, nothing you wouldn't see every day." He chuckled, a warm, resonant sound that felt oddly inviting. "Routine doesn't make them any less impressive. And those cars," he added, tilting his chin toward a sleek Ferrari pulling to a stop at the far end of the pier, "aren't exactly part of your everyday scenery either." I followed his gaze to a striking woman stepping out of the cherry-red car, her designer dress catching the golden light. "No," I admitted with a small smirk, "those are definitely not an everyday sight." His eyes flicked back to me, his expression shifting into something more curious. "You don't seem too impressed by all this, cars, glamour, the whole show." Leaning against the railing, I crossed my arms, letting the warm breeze play with my hair. "It wears off," I said, my tone edged with something between amusement and cynicism. "People here seem to think their worth is tied to their bank account balance. After a while, it all starts to feel hollow." His eyebrows lifted slightly, intrigued. "So, what about you? What do you measure your worth by?" The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, feeling the weight of the truth I wasn't sure I wanted to share. As the daughter of a billionaire who co-owned a sprawling American chocolate empire, I'd spent my life surrounded by excess. But the wealth, the privilege, it had never been my identity. It was why I had chosen to carve my path in Qatar, far from the shadow of my father's influence. "Well," I began cautiously, "I guess I'd say I value hard work, earning your place, you know, making your way without shortcuts." He studied me for a moment, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Then, he nodded slowly. "Fair enough. I'm Aiden, by the way." He extended a hand, his grin widening. "Mira," I replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not overpowering, and as his hand brushed mine, a strange, electric warmth shot through me. Weeks passed in a blur of unexpected encounters, conversations, and shared moments. One night, as we lounged by the pool at his sleek hotel, the city lights shimmering like scattered jewels in the distance, Aiden broached a subject that sent my heart racing. "We're looking for someone like you," he said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. I looked up from my drink, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "My company," he clarified, swirling his glass of whiskey idly. "It's an investment firm back in the States. We're expanding, and we need talented people, people who think outside the box." I frowned, unsure of how to respond. "And you think I fit the bill?" He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "You're smart, driven, and not afraid to speak your mind. That's exactly what we need. So, what do you say? Ready for a change of scenery?" His words hung in the air, a tantalizing mix of possibility and uncertainty. The thought of leaving Qatar, of starting anew in a place where I could redefine myself, was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. "I don't know," I admitted, the words barely more than a whisper. "It's a big step." He smiled, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Big steps lead to big adventures." In the end, I took the leap, though not without setting my boundaries. I insisted on finding my own place, a modest apartment far removed from the opulence Aiden was accustomed to. It wasn't just about independence, it was about staying true to the person I had fought to become. Settling into my new job at Aiden's firm was a whirlwind, but the challenge was invigorating. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that was mine, unshaped by the weight of my family's name. As for my father, I decided to keep my move, and my burgeoning relationship with Aiden, under wraps. For now, this new chapter was mine alone, and I intended to write it on my terms. The house was eerily quiet, and I could feel the weight of the silence pressing against me as I stood in the kitchen. Aiden's footsteps were heavy, deliberate, each one echoing like a warning. When he finally appeared in the doorway, his face was a mask of cold detachment, one I barely recognized. My heart sank as I searched for a trace of the man I had once loved. He didn't speak at first. Instead, he dropped a thick envelope onto the kitchen table with a dull thud. "Severance package," he said, his voice flat and sharp, like the edge of a blade. "The staff, cleaners, cooks, gardeners, they're all gone. Looks like you'll finally have to make this house a home." I stared at the envelope, my breath catching in my throat. His words were meant to sting, and they did. Anger flared within me, hot and immediate, but it was quickly overtaken by fear. This wasn't just about a severance package or cutting costs. This was about control. Aiden was drawing a line in the sand, daring me to cross it. I didn't want a divorce. I wanted my husband back, the Aiden who had once been attentive and kind, who had whispered dreams of a shared future. But that man felt like a distant memory, buried beneath layers of bitterness and power plays. In my desperation, I clung to the hope that I could fix things, that I could rebuild what we'd lost. So I made a decision, a misguided one, perhaps, but it felt right in the moment. I would embrace the role of homemaker, the role he seemed to think I was suited for. If I could create a perfect domestic sanctuary, maybe Aiden would see my value again. Maybe he'd remember the woman he'd fallen in love with. A part of me wanted to pick up the phone and call my father. He would know what to do, he always did, but the thought of admitting how far I'd fallen, of showing him how messy my life had become, was unbearable. This was my battle to fight, and I had to handle it on my own. Months passed, each day blurring into the next. My attempts to smooth over the growing rift between Aiden and me felt futile, like trying to patch a sinking ship with duct tape. Then one evening, Aiden came home with a plan. "We need a reset," he declared. "I've arranged a cruise on the yacht, just us, and a few guests." It wasn't exactly what I'd hoped for, but I agreed, desperate for any chance to reconnect. The day of the cruise was oppressively hot, the sun glaring off the polished deck of the yacht as we sailed across turquoise waters. Sophia, Aiden's mother, arrived in full regalia, a blinding white pantsuit dripping with diamonds that sparkled in the sunlight. Her entourage of affluent friends followed close behind, their laughter loud and grating as they sipped champagne on the deck. Aiden hovered around his mother like a dutiful son, refilling glasses and laughing at her outdated, half-hearted jokes. I forced a polite smile, ignoring the growing knot in my stomach. This wasn't a romantic escape, it was a performance, and I was just another prop. As the afternoon wore on, the champagne worked its magic on Sophia. Her polite facade crumbled, revealing a sharper, meaner edge. She turned to me, her glass swaying in her hand, and smirked. "It takes a special kind of woman," she slurred, "to give up a promising career to scrub toilets." Her friends erupted into laughter, their amusement cutting through me like shards of glass. I held my tongue, unwilling to escalate the situation, but Aiden, oblivious or indifferent, joined in. "That's right, Ma, Myra's a real domestic goddess now," he quipped, his tone light but laced with condescension. The humiliation burned, but I swallowed it, forcing myself to stay calm. As the evening wore on and the yacht approached a cluster of small, uninhabited islands, I realized I couldn't endure another moment. I approached the captain, an older man named Jackson, who had spent his life on the sea. He regarded me with concern as I made my request. "You want off, here?" he asked, his voice low. "Yes," I said firmly, "there's an island nearby. Drop me off there and notify the Coast Guard." He hesitated, but something in my expression must have convinced him. Minutes later, the yacht slowed, and the small boat was prepared. As I moved toward the railing, clutching a small bag, Aiden finally noticed. He stormed toward me, his irritation evident. "Where do you think you're going?" he demanded, his voice sharp. "Somewhere you can't follow," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. "This marriage is over. You and your mother can keep your money and your toxic games." Sophia, emboldened by champagne and my defiance, sneered, "You think you can just walk away?" You've been living off his money. Aiden's face darkened, and he lunged for my bag, yanking it from my hands. These are my credit cards, he hissed. You want to leave? Fine, but you leave with nothing. I didn't look back as I stepped into the smaller boat, the waves rocking it gently as Jackson guided it toward the island. The yacht's glittering lights faded into the distance, and with them, the toxic weight of a loveless marriage. For the first time in years, I felt free to rebuild my life on my terms, to reclaim my dignity and happiness. Fear mingled with exhilaration as I stared at the dark outline of the island ahead. This was the start of something new, a chapter where I would no longer be silenced, overshadowed, or underestimated.